the United Nations forecasts population of the world's cities could rise from what it is today, which is about 55% of the world's population lives in cities, to more than 70% in the next few decades. So we're talking millions more people in cities around the world, some of which are quite vulnerable to climate change, many of which are along coastlines. New York City, where we are right now, could see its population grow by just under 1 million people within the next few decades, according to Census Bureau forecasts. So given that we are projecting to see this substantial growth in some of the world's already most populous cities, what sorts of transit planning needs to happen now in order to ensure we can move people through these bigger, denser cities of the future? What can we start doing right now to prepare ourselves for what we know is coming?
So we at CORD are digitizing the public right-of-way and essentially instrumenting it so that it can be operated more efficiently and more productively. We think about this as square footage. You know, if you look at a city from on top, you know, it varies, but 20–30% is asphalt. And that's real estate that the city literally owns. And, you know, we see these macro trends of job and population growth, but you don't even have to look that far forward to see the problem. We're seeing the scope, not just the scale, but the scope of the demand changing before our very eyes in terms of ride-hail, delivery services driven by online shopping, scooter share, bike share, and so on. Never mind autonomous vehicles, you know, around the corner. And so all of this is creating a change in demand patterns right now. And we all live this every day, perhaps coming here.
Yeah, I think there's a tendency to kind of, at least I hear in a lot of these conversations about sustainable transportation, there's a tendency to make it sound like this is a solution that can come about through lots of individual choices. Like, especially in, I mean, New York City kind of has a unique conversation here when it comes to American cities because it is such a transit-rich city. But even here, there are a lot of journeys that the public transportation system is failing New Yorkers on, especially if you don't live in Manhattan. I think one of the great failures, not just New York, but pretty much every American city has made over the last generation or two, is not expanding our transit networks at all. The New York City subway system has less track mileage than it did in World War II. We've actually have a smaller transit system than we did.
I do think it's our responsibility for sure. And I think our strategy and our planning work is to support the business as we know it, but also to look at these landscapes and realize to be a good partner and a company that has a history in this country, at least of over 100 years. We've got to change our business model, right? And embrace the future so that we can all continue to be stoked and happy and live in these places that we call home.
We were talking just a moment ago about sort of space being at a premium and the allocation of space. Do you perhaps see an expanded role for electric bikes going into the future in cities? I mean, we don't really think about motorcycles, or at least I don't really think about motorcycles as urban transit today. But thinking about a future in which space is going to be more at a premium, and we're also, you know, juggling these sustainability goals, what is your thinking there?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think if you go, you know, if you roll back time, I mean, they very much were a form of urban transportation before post-World War II suburban, you know, expansion, and then they became these long-distance kind of iron horses for touring and all of those other genres of motorcycling. But I think that, yeah, and maybe what we look at two-wheel and we look at ownership or non-ownership, maybe it isn't motorcycling anymore, it's e-assist bicycles or it's scooters. And I think you see, like, we saw Segway, we saw hoverboard, we saw stand scooters are having their kind of moment. And I think we're still all kind of searching for the right form. I think motorcycling is looking downstream, two-wheel providers are kind of looking upstream, and it'll be interesting to see where we all meet in 5 years, you know, and what those forms are. But I hope we present forms that are for the 99%, and that we're not saying we solve our transportation problems with a motorcycle per se, that it's a a hybrid of our learnings in this evolution of what we're witnessing right now.